In the earliest chapters of our oldest stories, in the twilight of primordial history, there exist passages of scripture that feel profoundly strange. They are verses that seem out of place, fragments of a world that is almost alien to our own, echoes of a forgotten cosmology. They are brief, cryptic, and deeply unsettling, hinting at a history of our world that is far darker and more complex than the one we are often told. For millennia, theologians and scholars have wrestled with these verses, and mystics and poets have been haunted by them. They are the seeds of countless legends and the foundation of some of history's most forbidden books. We have explored the mystery of a lost divine artifact. We have unraveled the story of a lost heretical gospel. But today we delve into a mystery far older, a story that precedes the Great Flood and offers a terrifying explanation for why that cataclysm was necessary. We seek to understand the legacy of a lost race. Our subject is not an object or a text, but a monstrous union, a cosmic crime, and the terrible offspring that it spawned. We are investigating the story of the Nephilim. Welcome back to the Bible Weaver. Our journey today takes us to the very edge of the antediluvian world, a time before Noah's Ark, when the boundaries between heaven and earth were violently broken. We will confront a narrative of fallen angels, forbidden knowledge, and the race of giants that brought the world to the brink of ruin. If you are prepared to explore one of the Bible's most profound and disturbing mysteries, then join us as we weave together the threads of scripture, legend, and forbidden lore to uncover the story of the children of the fallen. Our investigation begins in the 6th chapter of the Book of Genesis, just before the narrative of Noah and the flood. In the span of just 4 verses, the Bible presents a prelude to destruction that has baffled readers for thousands of years. The passage reads as follows: "When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, 'My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.'" Let us pause and absorb the sheer strangeness of this account. It is dropped into the text with almost no explanation. It reads like a fragment of a much larger, well-known story that the original audience would have immediately understood, but which has become opaque to us over time. It raises a cascade of profound and troubling questions. Who precisely are these sons of God? Who are the daughters of man? And most importantly, who or what were the Nephilim? Were they the offspring of this union, or were they a separate group who were simply on the earth at the same time? The text is maddeningly ambiguous. And what does it mean that they were mighty men of old, men of renown? Is this a title of honor or a mark of infamy? And what is the connection between this event and God's subsequent drastic decision to destroy the entire world with a flood? To even begin to answer these questions, we must do something that is often difficult for the modern mind. We must strip away our own scientific post-Enlightenment understanding of the cosmos and attempt to re-enter the world of the ancient Near East. We must try to see the universe as the original authors and readers of Genesis would have seen it. Imagine a world that is not a spinning globe in an infinite vacuum of space. The ancient Israelite cosmology was a far more intimate and layered creation. They envisioned a 3-tiered universe. The Earth was a flat, circular disk, founded on pillars that plunged into the depths of a great cosmic ocean, the Tehom, the deep. Above the earth was a great solid dome, the Rakia, or the firmament. This was a physical barrier, like a vast ball of sapphire or hammered metal, which held back another ocean of celestial waters, the waters above the firmament. It was through the windows, or floodgates, of this dome that rain fell, and above this dome, in the highest heavens, was the dwelling place of God. And God, in this celestial realm, was not alone. The ancient scriptures of Israel are filled with references to a divine assembly, a celestial court. This was God's royal council, composed of a host of divine non-human beings. In the book of Job, when the curtain is pulled back on the heavenly realm, we see God holding court, and the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. In Psalm 82, God is pictured as a supreme king presiding over an assembly of lesser gods. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. This is the context for the term sons of God, or in the original Hebrew, Bene Ha-Elohim. In every other instance where this specific phrase is used in the Old Testament, it refers unambiguously to divine beings, angels, members of God's heavenly court. It does not refer to humans. These were powerful celestial entities who existed in the immediate presence of God, serving as his messengers, warriors, and administrators of the cosmos. The ancient world, unlike ours, was porous. The veil between the divine realm and the human world was thin, and it could be crossed. Angels visited patriarchs, wrestled with prophets, and delivered messages that changed the course of history. The idea of beings from the heavenly realm interacting with humanity was not a fantasy. It was a foundational belief of their reality. It is with this ancient map of the cosmos in our minds that we must now return to the cryptic verses of Genesis 6. Who were the actors in this cosmic drama? Let us examine the three key groups: the sons of God, the daughters of men, and the Nephilim. The identity of the sons of God has been the subject of three major historical interpretations. The first, and by far the most ancient, is that they were indeed divine beings, fallen angels. This interpretation was almost universally held by Jewish and Christian writers in the centuries leading up to and immediately following the time of Christ. The logic was simple. The text makes a clear distinction between the sons of God from above and the daughters of man from below. It presents a transgression of cosmic boundaries, a mixing of two entirely different orders of being, the divine and the human. This view understood the story as a tale of cosmic rebellion, where a faction of angels, consumed by lust for human women, abandoned their proper dwelling place in heaven, descended to earth, and engaged in a monstrous union that violated the created order. The second interpretation, which rose to prominence in the Christian church around the 4th and 5th centuries AD, is known as the Sethite view. This interpretation was championed by influential figures like Saint Augustine, who were deeply uncomfortable with the idea of angels being spiritual beings, procreating with humans. The Sethite view argues that the story is not about angels and humans, but about two distinct lineages of humanity. The sons of God were the righteous descendants of Adam's third son Seth, the line from which Noah would eventually come. The daughters of man, by contrast, were the ungodly, worldly descendants of Adam's first son Cain, the murderer. The sin, in this view, was not a cosmic transgression, but a social one. The holy line of Seth, who called upon the name of the Lord, began to intermarry with the corrupt pagan line of Cain. diluting their faith and polluting their piety. The mighty men of renown were the arrogant and tyrannical offspring of these mixed marriages whose wickedness contributed to the corruption that necessitated the flood. For many centuries, this became the dominant Orthodox Christian interpretation, as it neatly removed the awkward and embarrassing mythological elements of the story. The third interpretation is more recent, arising from modern biblical scholarship. This is the divine king's view. This theory suggests that the sons of God were not angels or Sethites, but powerful human rulers and kings of the ancient Near East. In many ancient cultures, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, kings were often seen as divine or as representatives of the gods on earth. They were sometimes even referred to as sons of their patron deity. According to this view, Genesis 6 is a polemic against the pagan practice of royal polygamy and tyranny. It describes despotic kings who, in their arrogance, believed they had the divine right to take any woman they desired for their harems, oppressing the common people. The offspring of these kings, the mighty men of renown, were a warrior aristocracy whose violence and pride filled the earth. The sin, therefore, was a sin of human hubris, a social critique of the oppressive power structures of the ancient world. Each of these interpretations has its strengths and weaknesses. The divine king's view connects well with the politics of the ancient world, but it struggles to explain why this specific sin would be singled out as the direct cause of a world-destroying flood. The Sethite view solves the problem of angels procreating, but it forces an unnatural reading onto the text. Nowhere else in the Bible are the descendants of Seth called sons of God, and it fails to explain the almost supernatural stature of the offspring. The first view, the angelic interpretation, while the most mythologically challenging to the modern mind, is the one that seems to fit the actual language of the text most naturally. It accounts for the stark contrast between the sons of God and the daughters of man. It explains the extraordinary nature of the offspring, and it provides a sin of sufficient magnitude, a fundamental violation of the created order, to warrant the extreme judgment of a global flood. It is also the interpretation that utterly dominated the Jewish world in which Jesus and his apostles lived. And to truly understand the power of this interpretation, we must turn our attention to a book that is not in our Bible, but which was, for a time, one of the most important and influential religious texts in the world. We must open the forbidden pages of the Book of Enoch. Let us now journey into a world of shadow and revelation, into the pages of a book that was once considered scripture, but is now largely forgotten, a text that takes the 4 cryptic verses of Genesis 6 and explodes them into a sprawling, detailed, and terrifying epic. The first Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish apocalyptic work attributed to the mysterious figure of Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. The Bible tells us almost nothing about him, only the enigmatic phrase that he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. But in the centuries after the Old Testament was completed, a rich tradition grew around Enoch, portraying him as a great sage, a scribe of righteousness, and a celestial traveler who was given a guided tour of the cosmos, the heavens, and the future. The Book of Enoch is not a single work, but a collection of writings from different authors over several centuries, likely between 300 BC and 100 AD. It was immensely popular in the Jewish world of the Second Temple period. It was known, quoted, and revered by many early Christians. In fact, the New Testament book of Jude quotes the Book of Enoch directly, referring to it as prophecy. Fragments of the book have been found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving its importance to the Essene community at Qumran. For a time, it was accepted as scripture by some early church fathers and was part of the canon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where it remains to this day. But for the rest of the world, it was eventually condemned, suppressed, and for over 1,000 years believed lost, known only through fragments and references in other ancient writings. Then, in the late 18th century, the Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from a journey to Ethiopia with 3 complete manuscripts of the Lost Book, preserved for centuries by the Ethiopian Church. A story that had been silenced was about to be told again. The section of the Book of Enoch known as the Book of the Watchers gives us the lurid backstory to Genesis 6. It tells a story not of a few random angels falling, but of a calculated cosmic conspiracy. The narrative begins in the heavens. A group of 200 divine beings, a class of angels known as the Watchers, were tasked with overseeing the earth and humanity. But as they looked down from their celestial station, they began to be consumed by lust for the beauty of human women. Their leader, a high-ranking angel named Shemihaza, saw what was happening and feared he would be held solely responsible for a great sin. So he gathered the other 200 and proposed a pact. They would all swear a binding oath to descend to earth together and take human wives, so that they would share the guilt and the consequences equally. A conspiracy was born. The 200 watchers descended upon the summit of Mount Hermon, a great mountain on the border of modern-day Lebanon and Syria. It was there they swore their terrible oath, binding themselves with curses. They then descended among humanity, and each took for himself a human wife. And from this unholy union, a new race was born. The women conceived and gave birth to giants, the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch describes them in horrific detail. Their height was said to be 3,000 ells, a truly colossal stature. They were beings of monstrous appetite. At first, they consumed all the food that humanity could produce, but their hunger was insatiable. When the food ran out, they turned on the humans themselves, devouring their flesh. And then, in a final act of grotesque horror, they began to turn on each other, drinking the blood of their own kind. The world was plunged into a nightmare of violence and cannibalism. But the sin of the Watchers was not limited to lust and procreation. They committed a second, and perhaps even greater, transgression. They began to teach humanity forbidden knowledge, secrets of heaven that mortals were never meant to possess. This was not the benevolent gift of Prometheus. This was the corrupting influence of rebellious spirits. An angel named Azazel taught humanity the art of making swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the arts of war. He taught them how to make jewelry, and perhaps most famously, he taught women the art of making up their eyes with kohl and adorning themselves with cosmetics, a knowledge that was seen as leading to seduction and moral decay. Other Watchers taught the secrets of sorcery, astrology, the meanings of signs, and the magical properties of roots and plants. This forbidden knowledge did not enlighten humanity. It corrupted it utterly. The world, which had been created in harmony, was now filled with warfare, deception, lust, and godlessness. The earth itself cried out in agony. The Book of Enoch describes a vision where the archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel look down from heaven and see the bloodshed and lawlessness that have consumed the world. They hear the desperate cries of the souls of the dead rising up to the gates of heaven, pleading for justice. The cry is heard. God summons his archangels and pronounces judgment upon the rebellious Watchers. To Raphael he says, "Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness." and on the great day of judgment he shall be cast into the fire. To Gabriel he says, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, destroy the children of the watchers from among men. And to Michael he gives the command to bind Shemihaza and his followers, to imprison them in the valleys of the earth until the final judgment, when they will be cast into an abyss of fire to be tormented forever. And what of the Nephilim, the giant offspring? They too are judged. They are too powerful to be destroyed by human hands. But because they are a hybrid of spirit and flesh, they can have no true place in either heaven or earth. God declares that they will be allowed to war against and kill one another until they are all annihilated. And upon their death, their spirits will not ascend to heaven, nor will they be allowed to rest in the earth. Their disembodied spirits will remain on the earth to become the evil spirits, the demons, that would plague, corrupt, and afflict humanity for the rest of history. It is only after this judgment is pronounced on the watchers and the Nephilim that God turns his attention to the corrupted world itself. He commissions the hero of the story who is waiting in the wings, Noah. God instructs the archangel Uriel to go to Noah and to say, hide thyself and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the earth and will destroy all that is on it. This detailed, terrifying narrative from the Book of Enoch was the lens through which many ancient Jews and early Christians read the cryptic verses of Genesis 6. For them, the Nephilim were not just the offspring of mixed marriages or tyrannical kings. They were the monstrous, cannibalistic, giant offspring of fallen angels. The mighty men of old, men of renown, was not a title of honor. It was a scar on the memory of the world. It referred to a race of demigods whose violence and corruption were so absolute that the Creator was forced to wash the entire world clean with a flood just to erase the stain of their existence. The flood, in this view, was not a punishment for ordinary human sin. It was a desperate act of cosmic cleansing, a last resort to sterilize a world that had been contaminated by a monstrous otherworldly evil. The waters of the great flood rose, and the corrupted world was wiped away. The slate was cleansed. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and humanity, through Noah and his family, was given a second chance. The rebellious watchers were imprisoned in their subterranean darkness, and their monstrous children, the Nephilim, were destroyed. The story, it would seem, was over. But the story is not over, because the Nephilim impossibly reappear. Hundreds of years after the flood, long after the world has been repopulated, the story continues in the Book of Numbers. The Israelites, freed from Egypt, are now poised on the border of the Promised Land, Canaan. Moses sends 12 spies, one from each tribe, to reconnoiter the land and its inhabitants. When they return after 40 days, 10 of the spies bring back a terrifying report. The land, they say, is indeed fruitful, a land flowing with milk and honey, but the people who live there are powerful, and their cities are fortified and very great. And then they deliver the chilling line that sends a wave of fear through the entire camp of Israel. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. This is a profound biblical mystery. How can this be? If all the Nephilim were destroyed in the global flood, how can they reappear in the land of Canaan centuries later? Their presence is given as a fact so terrifying that it causes the Israelites to lose faith and rebel against God. earning them a sentence of 40 years of wandering in the desert. This biblical contradiction has given rise to several explanations. Some have suggested that the term Nephilim here is not being used literally, but figuratively, a kind of hyperbole. The spies were so terrified by the large stature of the Canaanite warriors, the sons of Enoch, that they used the most fearsome name from the ancient legends to describe them. They were saying, "These men are so huge, they are like the legendary giants of old." It was a propaganda term, meant to incite fear. Another, more literal interpretation suggests that the sin of the Watchers was not a one-time event. This theory posits that there was a second, smaller incursion of fallen angels after the flood, which led to the re-emergence of these giant clans in and around the land of Canaan. This view is less common and has less textual support, but it is one attempt to harmonize the two accounts. A third possibility comes from a careful reading of the Genesis text itself. Genesis 6:4 states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward." This small phrase, "and also afterward," is seen by some as a textual hint that the lineage, in some form, was known to have survived the flood. How this could be is a matter of intense debate. Some have pointed to the ambiguity of Noah's wife's lineage, or the wives of his sons, speculating that the genetic trait may have been carried on the ark through one of them. A deeply troubling and controversial idea. Regardless of how they survived, the Bible is clear that after the flood, the Israelites' history is intertwined with a struggle against several clans of giants who are said to inhabit the land of Canaan. The sons of Enoch, the Enochim, are described as a race of tall, powerful people who are driven out of the hill country by Joshua, but some remain in the Philistine cities of Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. The Rephaim are another such group. The most famous of their kings was Og of Bashan, whose bed is described as a monstrous piece of furniture, an iron bed 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, roughly 13.5 feet long by 6 feet wide, a bed built for a giant. And of course, the most famous giant of all comes from this lineage. The story of David and Goliath is the ultimate underdog tale. But we often forget Goliath's specific description. He is a champion from the city of Gath, one of the last strongholds of the Anakim. He is a giant, said to be 6 cubits and a span tall, over 9 feet. He's a remnant of these ancient, fearsome peoples, a final echo of the mighty men of old. When the young shepherd David defeats Goliath, it is more than just a victory of the small over the large. In the context of Israel's sacred history, it is the final symbolic victory of the line of faith over the last remnants of the monstrous, semi-divine race that had corrupted the world before the flood. For most of history, the story of the Nephilim remained in the realm of theology and mythology. It was a story about the nature of sin, the boundaries of creation, and the triumph of God's order over the forces of chaos. But in our modern era, an era defined by technology, space exploration, and a hunger for scientific explanations of ancient mysteries, the story of the Nephilim has been taken out of the world of theology and placed into an entirely new and wildly popular context: the theory of ancient astronauts. Beginning in the mid-20th century, authors like Erich von Däniken began to propose a radical, new lens through which to view ancient myths and scriptures. What if, they asked, the beings our ancestors called gods or angels were not supernatural or divine beings at all? What if they were extraterrestrial visitors? What if the heavens they came from were not a spiritual dimension, but literally outer space? When this lens is applied to the story of the Nephilim, Genesis 6 is transformed. The sons of God are reimagined as an advanced alien race, the Watchers of Enoch's tale. Their descent to Earth is not a fall from grace, but the landing of a spacecraft. Their union with the daughters of man is not a supernatural act of procreation, but a scientific program of genetic engineering, or hybridization. The Nephilim, their giant offspring, are therefore alien-human hybrids, a new species created through advanced biological manipulation. The forbidden knowledge that the Watchers taught humanity is also reinterpreted. It is not the corrupting secrets of sorcery and magic. It is advanced technology. The teaching of metallurgy, the making of swords, knives, and breastplates is seen as the gift of technological and military science. The teaching of astrology and the signs of the heavens is seen as the sharing of advanced astronomical and navigational knowledge. Even the teaching of cosmetics and adornment is sometimes speculatively linked to knowledge of chemistry and mineralogy. In this framework, the Great Flood takes on a new meaning. It may have been a natural cataclysm foreseen by the aliens, who then instructed their chosen human servant, Noah, to build a vessel to preserve the genetic stock of the planet. Or, in more sinister interpretations, the flood may have been an intentional act of planetary cleansing, a civil war among the gods, one faction of alien beings wiping out the unauthorized genetic experiments of another. This ancient astronaut theory has become a pervasive cultural phenomenon, spawning countless books, television shows, and online communities. It is an alluring theory because it offers a seemingly rational, scientific explanation for a story that otherwise seems mythologically unbelievable. It takes the supernatural and makes it technological. However, it is crucial to recognize that this theory, while popular, has no basis in mainstream archaeology, history, or biblical scholarship. It requires lifting the ancient texts completely out of their known historical and cultural context and imposing a modern science fiction framework onto them. The ancient authors were not writing about spaceships and genetic engineering. They were writing about their understanding of the cosmos, of the divine counsel, of the porous boundary between heaven and earth, and of the moral and spiritual forces that they believed governed their world. To read Genesis 6 as a story about aliens is to ignore what the text was actually trying to say in its own time and on its own terms. While it is a fascinating modern reinterpretation, it tells us more about our own technologically obsessed age than it does about the ancient world. So, where does this leave us? After journeying through the cryptic verses of Genesis, the epic mythology of the Book of Enoch, the lingering echoes of giants in the Promised Land, and the speculative theories of the modern age, what are we to make of the Nephilim? Who were they? Perhaps the true power of the story lies not in a literal historical answer, but in the profound and enduring themes that it represents. The story of the Nephilim, at its core, is a story about boundaries. It is a story about the sacred order of creation and the catastrophic consequences that occur when that order is violated. It is about the disastrous results of blurring the line between the divine and the human, between the holy and the profane. The sin of the Watchers was a sin of refusal, a refusal to accept their place. They desired what was not theirs, and in doing so, they unleashed chaos and destruction upon the world. It is also a story about the nature of sin itself. The tale suggests that evil is not merely a matter of human misbehavior. It posits the existence of a more ancient, more powerful, non-human source of corruption. The evil spirits of the dead Nephilim, which the Book of Enoch claims still roam the earth, represent an explanation for the origin of demonic influence, a force that tempts, deceives, and destroys humanity from within. The story paints the human struggle not as a battle merely against our own worst impulses, but as our being caught in the crossfire of a much larger cosmic conflict, a war that began long before our time. And finally, the story of the Nephilim is a profound statement about the nature of God's justice and his commitment to his creation. It presents a world so utterly contaminated, so hopelessly lost to monstrous evil, that its only hope for renewal was a complete and total reset. The flood, in this context, is not the act of a petulant, angry deity, but the radical, agonizing surgery of a divine physician, a surgeon cutting out a cancer that threatened to consume the entire patient, in order to preserve a remnant of life from which a new and healthier world could grow. The Nephilim remain one of the Bible's most enduring and unsettling enigmas. They are ghosts from a drowned world, titans of myth whose story serves as a permanent, terrifying warning. Whether they were the hybrid offspring of fallen angels, the arrogant children of tyrannical kings, or the misremembered legends of ancient astronauts, their legacy is the same. They represent a fundamental truth about our world, that the lines between order and chaos are fragile, that the temptation to transgress sacred boundaries is ever present, and that the consequences of such transgressions can be world-altering. Their story is a dark thread woven into the grand tapestry of Scripture, a reminder that in the beginning there were giants on the earth, and the world has never been quite the same since. Thank you for joining us at the Bible Weaver for this deep exploration of one of history's most fascinating and forbidden chapters. The identity of the Nephilim continues to be a subject of intense debate. Which interpretation do you find most compelling? Was this a cosmic rebellion, a social critique, or something else entirely? Weave your own thoughts into the conversation below. And if you found this journey into the antediluvian world compelling, please show your support by giving this video a like, sharing it with others who are fascinated by the Bible's deepest mysteries, and by subscribing to the Bible Weaver, ringing the notification bell so you never miss our next unraveling of the sacred stories that have shaped our world. Until next time, may your own search for knowledge be a rewarding one.